Silence can be deafening, but not for the person who mastered the art of detachment. If your avoidant ex is acting like you never existed, it's not because they forgot you, it's because ignoring you gives them a sense of control. As the great philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "The most common lie is that which one lies to himself." They pretend you never mattered, not because it's true, but because it protects them from facing the reality of their own emotional limitations. But here's the hard truth. This isn't about you. It never was. Their behavior is a reflection of them, not of your worth. As Maya Angelou wisely put it, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Avoidants show you who they are through distance, through cold detachment, through making you feel invisible. The mistake is thinking you can change that by chasing them. So, what do? Do you fight for their attention? Do you try to remind them of the love you once shared? No. That's exactly what they expect. They thrive on knowing that their absence hurts you. But you have a choice. You can do something they never saw coming. You can flip the script. Like Bruce Lee once said, "Be water, my friend." Instead of pushing against the wall they've built, flow around it. Adapt. Move forward. Most people make the mistake of seeing an avoidant silence as a challenge, something to overcome. But the truth is, their silence is their weakness. They are running from emotional depth, from connection, from themselves. And the more you chase, the faster they run. Instead of feeding into their game, take a page from Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The moment you stop trying to break their silence and start embracing your own power, is the moment you become untouchable. The moment you stop looking for validation from someone who avoids intimacy is the moment you set yourself free. Remember what Steve Jobs said. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. And that includes wasting it on someone who refuses to acknowledge your existence. They might act indifferent, but deep down, they expect you to reach out. They expect you to seek closure. They expect you to break first. Don't give them that satisfaction. Instead, take back your energy. As Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, "The greatest victory is that which requires no battle." Your silence, when chosen out of strength and not desperation, will speak louder than any words ever could. Think about it. Why should you fight for a place in someone's life when they are showing you that they don't deserve you? As Oprah Winfrey once said, "When you undervalue what you do, the world will undervalue who you are." It's time to stop undervaluing yourself. It's time to stop waiting for them to acknowledge your worth and start embracing it for yourself. I know it's not easy, but I promise you this. When you shift your focus from them to you, everything changes. You'll no longer crave validation from someone who can't even face their own emotions. You'll no longer replay old conversations, wondering what went wrong. You'll realize that the real power was in your hands all along. So, if you're ready to stop waiting for answers that will never come and start reclaiming your strength, stay with me until the end of this video, because what I'm about to reveal will change the way you see your avoidant ex forever. Drop a comment below and say, "I choose my power." And if you're ready to dive deeper, join the Ace Wisdom family. Together, we'll unlock the truths that set you free. Ace Wisdom presents Why You're Avoidant. X acts like you never existed. Reason number 1. Avoidants detach to protect themselves. Your avoidant ex isn't ignoring you because they don't care. It's because they've spent their entire life mastering the art of emotional escape. To them, closeness equals danger, and the moment things get too intense, their instinct is to shut down. As Sigmund Freud once said, unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. Avoidants don't process emotions the way you do. Instead of confronting pain, they suppress it, pretending you never existed because facing the truth is too uncomfortable. Think back to your relationship. Were there times when they seemed distant for no reason? When they pulled away just as things were going well? That wasn't random. Avoidants fear dependency, and when they start feeling too emotionally involved, their subconscious tells them to retreat. It's not that they never cared, it's that caring too much feels like losing control. By acting like you never existed, they are reinforcing the emotional walls they've built their whole life to protect themselves. Now, here's the ironic part. The more you chase them, the stronger their defenses become. They see emotional closeness as a threat, and any attempt to reconnect only pushes them further away. As the great Stoic philosopher Epictetus put it, people are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of them. To an avoidant, emotional intensity isn't love, it's overwhelming. So they convince themselves that shutting you out is the only way to regain their sense of control. But here's the real question. Is that the kind of connection you truly want? A relationship where you're constantly questioning if you're too much, if you're pushing too hard, if they'll disappear the moment things get real. You deserve a love that doesn't run at the first sign of depth. You deserve someone who leans in, not out. And the moment you stop trying to break their walls and start focusing on your own emotional strength, that's the moment you win. So, instead of wondering why they act like you never existed, start asking yourself, why am I waiting for someone who refuses to face their own feelings? Because the truth is, their detachment isn't about you, it's about them. And when you realize that, their silence stops being painful and starts being proof of why you deserve better. Reason number 2. Ignoring you reinforces their sense of control. For an avoidant, control is everything. They've spent years perfecting the ability to keep people at a distance, and one of the most effective ways to do that is by pretending you never existed. This isn't just about moving on. It's about reinforcing the idea that they are in charge of their emotions, their space, and most importantly, their ability to detach at will. As Machiavelli once said, the wise man does at once what the fool does at last. To them, cutting you off quickly isn't heartless. It's smart. It prevents vulnerability before it can even begin. Deep down, avoidants fear that emotional intimacy will strip them of their autonomy. The closer they get to someone, the more they feel like they're losing control over their own emotions. So, the moment a relationship ends, they flip the switch. They don't want to dwell, reminisce, or process feelings the way you do. Instead, they convince themselves that you never really mattered. Because admitting otherwise would mean admitting that they need someone, and that terrifies them. Think about it. Why do they act so cold when just weeks ago they were laughing with you, holding you, making memories? It's not that they've forgotten. It's that acknowledging those moments means acknowledging that you had an impact on them. And that kind of emotional weight feels unbearable to an avoidant. As the famous writer George Orwell once put it, the most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history. By erasing you from their life, they rewrite the story in a way that keeps them feeling strong. But here's the key. This isn't real strength. True strength isn't about shutting people out. It's about facing emotions head-on. While they may seem unbothered, their need for control is actually a sign of emotional fragility. A secure person doesn't need to pretend an ex never existed. A secure person acknowledges the past, learns from it, and moves forward with wisdom. By refusing to play their game, by refusing to seek validation from someone who denies their own emotions, you reclaim your power. So instead of asking why they erased you, ask yourself, why do I care about someone who needs to manipulate reality to feel in control? The moment you stop needing answers from them is the moment you break free from their hold. And when that happens, their control over you disappears, just like they did. Reason number 3. They convince themselves you were never that important. Avoidants have a defense mechanism that allows them to move on faster than most people. They downplay the significance of the relationship. This isn't because they didn't care. It's because admitting they cared would force them to confront emotions they've spent their whole lives running from. As the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "We are our choices." And their choice is to rewrite history in a way that makes it easier for them to walk away. When an avoidant ex acts like you never existed, they're not just erasing you from their life. They're rewriting the entire narrative in their mind. They tell themselves things like, "It wasn't that deep," or "I was never really in love," because those lies protect them from dealing with loss. If they acknowledge how much you meant to them, they'd have to process emotions they've been suppressing for years. And that's not something they know how to handle. This is why you might feel shocked at how easily they seem to move on. It's not that they aren't affected. It's that they've convinced themselves not to be. They create emotional distance by trivializing what you shared. The famous author F. Scott Fitzgerald once wrote, "The loneliest moment in someone's life is when they are watching their whole world fall apart, and all they can do is stare blankly." This is the reality of an avoidant. Rather than face their emotions, they numb themselves to them. But here's the truth. The fact that they pretend you were never important doesn't mean it's true. It only means they don't have the emotional tools to process what they lost. The worst thing you can do is try to prove your worth to them. Why? Because the more you try to remind them of what you had, the more they'll push the idea that it never mattered. It's their way of keeping control. So, instead of wondering how they can forget you so easily, remind yourself. Just because someone denies your impact doesn't mean you didn't have one. Their detachment is their coping mechanism, but that doesn't mean you should make it yours. Let them rewrite history if they need to, but don't let them rewrite your self-worth along with it. Reason number 4. Avoidants fear the weight of emotional responsibility. Avoidants aren't just afraid of intimacy. They're afraid of what comes with it, responsibility. Being emotionally connected to someone means considering their feelings, being accountable for your actions, and handling difficult conversations. That level of responsibility feels overwhelming to them, so they take the easy way out, complete avoidance. As Winston Churchill once said, "The price of greatness is responsibility." But avoidants don't want to pay that price. Instead, they disappear and act like you never existed. because facing the emotional consequences of their actions would require growth they're not ready for. Think about it. Did your ex ever struggle with deep conversations? Did they deflect when things got serious? Maybe they shut down when you expressed your feelings, or worse, made you feel like you were too much for wanting basic emotional connection. That wasn't a coincidence. Avoidants see emotions as a burden, something that weighs them down instead of something that strengthens bonds. By acting like you never existed, they dodge any responsibility for how their actions affected you. This is why avoidants rarely offer closure. Giving closure would mean admitting they played a role in your pain. It would mean acknowledging the impact of their choices. And for someone who has spent years avoiding emotional depth, that's the last thing they want to do. As Carl Jung put it, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Ignoring you isn't about you. It's about their unwillingness to face themselves. But here's what you need to understand. Emotional responsibility isn't optional in a healthy relationship. Love isn't just about attraction and fun. It's about commitment, communication, and accountability. If your ex isn't capable of handling that, then they weren't capable of giving you real love in the first place. Letting them go isn't a loss, it's a blessing. So instead of waiting for them to acknowledge the pain they caused, accept that they won't. Not because you don't deserve it, but because they aren't capable of giving it. And that's not your burden to carry. Your healing begins when you stop expecting an avoidant to provide closure and start giving it to yourself. Reason number 5. Emotional intimacy is a threat to their independence. For avoidants, emotional intimacy feels like a loss of independence. They crave freedom and autonomy, and anything that encroaches on that sense of self is viewed as a threat. The moment things get too intimate, they panic. They believe that if they allow someone to get too close, they risk losing their individuality and ultimately their freedom. As author and speaker Brené Brown wisely said, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. But for an avoidant, vulnerability equates to danger, leading them to act like you never existed to preserve their sense of self. This need for independence often manifests as a fear of commitment. When you were in a relationship, did your ex often express discomfort with plans for the future? Did they shy away from discussions about long-term goals or the potential of a shared life? This isn't just casual disinterest. It's a deeply ingrained fear of being tied down. To avoid that feeling of being trapped, they shut down and convince themselves that they don't need anyone, that they can go it alone. The irony is that while they push you away, they may also long for connection in their own way. However, their fear of losing their independence leads them to self-sabotage relationships. They convince themselves that ignoring you is the best way to maintain their freedom. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Avoidants struggle to live forward when they're trapped in a loop of self-preservation. This behavior is not just about rejecting you, it's about rejecting the idea that they need anyone at all. They'll tell themselves that moving on without you is easy, that you never really mattered, simply to soothe their own fear of emotional dependency. But deep down, this detachment is a reflection of their internal struggle. They might act like they're thriving in their independence, but the truth is that true emotional connection can be the very thing that helps us grow. So, instead of wondering why they treat you as if you never existed, recognize that their actions are a defense mechanism rooted in fear. It's a sign that they haven't learned how to balance emotional closeness with their need for independence. Remember that you deserve a partner who embraces vulnerability and cherishes the connection you shared. Letting go of someone who doesn't see your worth is the first step toward finding the fulfilling relationship you truly deserve. Reason number 6. They rely on avoidance as a coping mechanism. For many avoidants, their tendency to act as if you never existed is not merely a reflection of their feelings about you. It's a coping mechanism they've developed over time to manage their emotions. Rather than confronting their feelings, they choose to avoid them altogether. This pattern of behavior is rooted in their past experiences, where emotional suppression was likely a learned response. As psychologist John Bowlby stated, "The bond that links your true family is not one of blood, but of respect and joy in each other's life." For avoidants, emotional connections can feel threatening, leading them to dismiss relationships altogether. When faced with emotional discomfort, avoidants may revert to avoidance as a default reaction. This means they disengage, cut ties, and act as if the relationship never mattered, all in an effort to protect themselves from further pain. Their behavior is a way of coping with the complex feelings they don't know how to process. This can leave you feeling dismissed, as if the love you shared was insignificant. But the reality is that their avoidance stems from a place of fear. Fear of being vulnerable and fear of the emotional upheaval that closeness can bring. In their minds, by pretending you never existed, they can maintain a sense of control and keep their emotional world intact. As the author J.K. Rowling once said, "It is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Their choice to erase you from their life is less about your worth and more about their inability to confront their own emotions. Avoidants often prioritize their emotional safety over the connections they forge, which leads to a cycle of withdrawal and isolation. This coping mechanism can create a painful paradox. While they may feel safe in their detachment, they are ultimately robbing themselves of the intimacy and support that come from healthy relationships. It's important to understand that their behavior is not a reflection of your value. It's a testament to their struggles with emotional vulnerability. As you process the end of your relationship, remind yourself that you deserve someone who is willing to engage openly and honestly, not someone who runs away when things get tough. So, instead of feeling hurt by their silence, recognize it as a sign of their internal battle. You cannot change how they cope with their emotions, but you can choose to honor your own feelings. Letting go of someone who relies on avoidance is a powerful step toward finding a relationship where both partners can face their emotions together, creating a connection based on trust, openness, and genuine intimacy. As we wrap up this exploration of why your avoidant ex acts like you never existed, it's essential to remember that their behavior speaks volumes about their internal struggles rather than your worth. Each reason we've discussed reveals a deeper truth. Avoidants often grapple with their fear of intimacy, emotional responsibility, and vulnerability. Their tendency to detach and pretend you never mattered is not a reflection of who you are, but rather a defense mechanism rooted in their inability to face their emotions. Navigating a relationship with an avoidant can be incredibly challenging, and their actions can leave you feeling rejected and unworthy. But it's vital to shift your perspective. Instead of dwelling on their silence and indifference, focus on your healing journey. Recognize that you deserve love and connection with someone who values emotional intimacy and is willing to engage openly. Remember the wise words of Brené Brown: Vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage. Embracing your vulnerability can lead to more profound connections in the future. Letting go of an avoidant is not a failure. It's an act of self-preservation. By choosing to prioritize your emotional well-being, you open yourself up to the possibility of healthier relationships built on mutual respect, understanding, and love. It's time to reclaim your power and embrace your worth. You are not defined by someone else's inability to connect. Instead, you are strong, deserving, and capable of finding a partner who will celebrate your presence in their life. Thank you for joining me on this journey to understand why your avoidant ex may act like you never existed. If you found value in this video, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue to support each other on the path to emotional clarity and healing. Remember, you are not alone, and there is a community of people who understand what you're going through.